Okay, so let's talk about protein structure. When we talk about protein, we say that proteins are made up of amino acids. But when we say that, we miss out a very important intermediate step. That is, first, the amino acids will form peptides, and those peptides will arrange themselves in a particular manner, the 3D arrangement. That is what we call the protein. That particular 3D arrangement is what we call protein. Okay? So now, let's understand how they arrange themselves in peptides and then in their 3D arrangement. So first, when there are two amino acids, they will interact with each other by forming a covalent bond which is called peptide bond. This peptide bond holds two amino acids together, and we will learn its characteristic later. So when there are two amino acids held together by a peptide bond, we call that a dipeptide. When there are three amino acids held together by a peptide bond, we call that a tripeptide. And if there are three amino acids joined together, we call that tripeptide. When there are four, we call that tetrapeptide, and so on. And when there are more than 20 amino acids, we call that polypeptide. So when it is less than 20, we call that. So when the number of amino acids is less than 20, we call that oligopeptide. And when it is more than 20, we call that polypeptide, right? So you must have noticed that although we are calling it dipeptide, it is not actually the number of peptide bonds. It is actually the number of amino acids that are involved in that oligopeptide or polypeptide, that based on which we are actually naming the peptide, right? So the dipeptide does not mean there are two peptide bonds. Rather, it simply means that there are two amino acids there. Okay. Now let's look at the specific feature of the peptide bond. A peptide bond looks something like this, which is somewhat similar to an amide bond, right? But it has some very special feature, and which are those we will learn here, okay? So this CN bond is called the peptide bond, and although we have written it as a single bond, this can undergo resonance and form a double bond. How? Because this particular NH of the peptide bond have a lone pair, and this has a lone pair, and this lone pair can come here and form a double bond. This bond can shift here and it will form a structure like this. Now you see that the peptide bond has attained a double bond nature. Here it was a single bond. So due to resonance, the peptide bond can exist as single bond or double bond. But if both of these states are transient, the single bond is also transient, the double bond is also transient. What does that mean? The peptide bond is neither existing as a double bond all the time or a single bond all the time. Okay? So when a molecule has or a bond has a character like this, we call it partial double bond character. Partial double bond character. And because of this partial double bond character, its bond length is greater than double bond but less than single bond. And bond length is actually a measure of what? It is a measure of how strong the bonds is. Strength, right? But they are inversely proportional. What I mean by that is when two atoms are joined together, let's say this is A, this is B, when they are joined together by a bond, the distance between them is actually a measure of how strongly they are attracting each other. So the more the strength of their attraction, the less the distance between them becomes. Okay? So bond strength is inversely proportional to bond length. So if the peptide bond has a bond length greater than double bond and less than single bond, their bond strength would have just the opposite order, that is double bond greater than peptide bond greater than single bond. The bond length of double bond is 1.27 angstrom, this is 1.33 angstrom, and this is 1.45 angstrom. Okay. So now that we understand peptide bond, let's now understand the different folding levels of a protein. So a protein folds in 4 degrees. Okay, there are 4 degrees of folding here. What are they? Primary, secondary, tertiary, and quaternary. These are called primary structure, secondary structure, tertiary structure, and quaternary structure. Let's take all of them one by one. First, we have primary structure. Primary structure is basically the string of amino acid. Now, when we draw a string of amino acid, there is amino acid 1, there is amino acid 2, amino acid 3, and so on. They are joined together by peptide bond. Okay. So, when we draw a structure like this, there is supposed to be a free NH and there is supposed to be a free carboxylic group here as well. So, the end where the NH2, where the amino group is free, we call that N-terminal. And the end where the COH is free, we call that C-terminal. How that is happening? Let's form a peptide bond between 2 amino acids. So this is one amino acid and this is another amino acid. This has 2 N, this has 2 H. This H and the carboxylic groups OH will be removed as H2O. This type of reactions are called condensation, where one molecule of H2O is released and the participating molecules then form a bond between them. So here you can see that the molecules that participated, one of their NH group was free and one of their COH group is free. Imagine multiple of such rounds are happening. The last 2 amino acids at the 2 terminals will have their NH, have their amino group and their carboxylic group, carboxylic acid group free. Because of that, in any long peptide as well, there would be an N-terminal and there would be a C-terminal. Now this bond, the primary structure, therefore, is held together by peptide bond, which is a covalent bond. This is a feature that we have to remember. It is just the linear structure of amino acid. Then we have the secondary structure. The secondary structure of amino acids are held together by hydrogen bonds, which is non-covalent type of bond. And it forms different structures. For example, the most common types are alpha helix and beta pleats, which ultimately forms beta. This is alpha helix and this is beta pleat. Then there will be another one here followed by this, and that we will draw later. Now, if they need to stay in this structure, it is basically a string, right? it's like a string. So how are they being held in this particular structure? They need to have some kind of force that is holding them together like this. That force is hydrogen bond. And now the question comes, hydrogen bond is forming, okay, but between which residues? The hydrogen bond forms between peptide bonds. Peptide bonds. How, that we will see here. We will take this particular part and we will zoom it in here. We'll take this here. Okay. So here the first amino acid, we call this ith amino acid. Why, we will see that later. This is ith amino acid, and here where the next amino acid that will participate in hydrogen bond, it is I plus 4. And if this is first amino acid, this will be fifth amino acid. So this amino acid, its NH2 group is free and it is forming a peptide bond with the next amino acid. So it will have CONH, right? So this CO, and here we have another CONH. This H and this O will form a hydrogen bond. Okay? And this N that is covalently bonded to the hydrogen that is forming the hydrogen bond will be called hydrogen bond donor. Hydrogen bond donor, and this will be called acceptor. Hydrogen bond acceptor. Okay? And why we call this ith amino acid and I plus 4th amino acid? Because in the next term in here, this one, the next one will form as the ith amino acid or the first amino acid, and with respect to that first amino acid, the fifth one will form the hydrogen bond with it. So that will become the fifth. And now when we are naming it, we need to be neutral, and because of that we say I and I plus 4 amino acid. Okay. So this is hydrogen bonding in alpha-hedex. In beta-pleated sheets, in these, they are not just one strand, there are two like this, okay? And they are joined together by this thing. This is a stretch of amino acid or loop. Now, we say that there is one N-terminal and C-terminal. When that N-terminal and C-terminal is running in the same direction, or we can say the pleats are running in the opposite direction. What I mean by that, if N to C direction is drawn with an arrow, then this is coming from what? This is N-terminal, so this must be the C-terminal here before the loop. And here it should be the N-terminal, and it ended here with the C-terminal. So if N to C is given like this arrow, then N to C in this one will be like this. So we can draw it like this. Right? So they are running in the opposite direction. These are called anti-parallel beta sheets. Anti-parallel beta sheets. Then we have the parallel beta sheets which run like this. So they are both running from N to C direction in the same way. And here only C of one peptide and the N of one peptide will be joined together by a loop. Therefore, here it becomes a longer loop. This is parallel beta sheet. Parallel beta sheet. Okay. So here, one thing that you have to remember here, it is a shorter loop. And here it is a longer loop. Now let's see how they are forming the hydrogen bond. Let's zoom into one portion of an anti-parallel beta sheet. So here there would be a CO group, and here there would be NH that are forming hydrogen bond. In case of anti-parallel beta sheet, this hydrogen bond is somewhat linear, and therefore it is a stronger bond compared to anti-parallel beta sheet where they run like this. So they are not aligning together. So the carbonyl oxygen is here and the NH is here. So it's at an angle. So this is at an angle. This is a weaker bond. Okay. So one thing that you have to remember about, two things that you have to remember about antiparallel and parallel beta sheet. Antiparallel ones have shorter loops, have linear hydrogen bonds which are stronger, whereas parallel beta sheets require longer loops and they have hydrogen bonds at an angle and therefore they are weaker. Okay. So then we go to the tertiary structure. Okay. So tertiary structures are held together by non-covalent as well as covalent bonds. Okay. So what are the non-covalent bond that we are talking about? The non-covalent bonds here are van der Waals forces, hydrogen bonds, electrostatic interaction, and so on. And covalent ones are disulfide bonds. We'll take all of them one by one. Okay, van der Waals interaction is the interaction that can happen between any two atoms whenever they come closer with respect to like a particular distance, which is called van der Waals radii. Van der Waals radii. If two atoms are close enough so that they are at van der Waals radii or closer than that, then they will have some sort of interaction that they will attract each other with some sort of force, and that is called van der Waals forces of attraction. Then hydrogen bonds, the one that I just explained. So there would be a donor, there would be an acceptor, and there will be a hydrogen that the donor will donate, and that hydrogen will interact with the acceptor, and that is our hydrogen bond. Then we have electrostatic interaction. Electrostatic interaction is happening between charged residues, oppositely charged, negative and positive. So they are happening between oppositely charged residues, and in case of amino acids, when we are talking about tertiary structures, these interactions are actually happening between the R groups of different amino acids. Because if I draw an amino acid, their carboxyl group and their amino group are participating in peptide bonds. So the only group that is free is R, because H is not forming any kind of bond. So R is the only one that is able to actually form any kind of bond. So they can form any bond. Say for example, there are n number of amino acid and there is R3 which is negatively charged and there is R2 which is positively charged. They do not have to be close in the primary structure. That is, they do not have to stay adjacent. They do not have to be attached to each other by peptide bond. They can be anywhere in the linear structure, in the primary structure. But when they are folding, they can come close and they will be held in their close position by electrostatic interaction. And this is not just in case of charged amino acids. In case of hydrogen bond donor and hydrogen bond acceptor, doesn't matter in linear structure where they are situated, they can come close and interact with each other. Okay, and form a 3D structure. Same goes for van der Waals forces as well. So these are the and also there is hydrophobic interaction that I forgot to mention. Hydrophobic interaction takes place between the amino acid that have non-polar R group, like non-polar R group, and then there is another amino acid which has non-polar R group, okay, and be far away in the linear structure, and they will still form interaction. Hydrophobic interaction is not as such an interaction. It is basically sequestering each other, like this non-polar group and this non-polar group comes close to each other so that they do not have to interact with polar groups. Okay, other polar environment in which they are present, they do not have to interact with that, because that reduces the entropy and that is not at all energetically favorable. This is like two introverts coming in together because they do not, in a party of extroverts, two introverts coming together because they do not want to interact with the extroverts. Okay, so that is exactly what hydrophobic interaction is. Then we have the covalent interaction. So let me say hydrophobic interaction happens between non-polar all hydrophobic groups, hydrophobic R groups. This happens charged positive and negative R groups. Hydrogen bond in the R groups, and this is also R groups. So all of these interactions are happening between R groups of different amino acids. Now let's talk about the covalent one. So in the covalent one, there is only one type of interaction, one type of bond, that is disulfide bond. This disulfide bond formation takes place within cysteine R group, because cysteine R group looks something like this. This is C alpha, CH2SH. This is called the thiol group. And when two cysteine are in close proximity with each other, their thiol groups come close together and they will form a bond like this. This bond is called disulfide bond. This bond is called disulfide bonds. Okay? Disulfide bond, and this is the only type of covalent bond. And now let's come to the quaternary structure. Okay? Quaternary structure. So quaternary structure is also held together by the R groups interaction, and the interactions are the same in case of tertiary and quaternary. Then if the interactions are seen, what is the difference between tertiary and quaternary structure? For tertiary structure takes place when there is only one polypeptide. Okay, so it will form a structure like this. When the secondary structures and the in their secondary structures like this, they have arranged themselves to form a structure like this. Okay, this is secondary structure. This is, they are joined together. This is the same polypeptide, secondary structure, tertiary structure. And if a protein has only one chain of amino acid, only one polypeptide, that is monomeric, it will form tertiary structure. Okay, and that's it. It will not form any more, it will not undergo any more folding if it is monomeric. Tertiary is the end. Tertiary is the ultimate folding that the monomeric protein is going to undergo. An example of this would be myoglobin. Myoglobin is a monomeric protein. Okay, so it only undergoes tertiary structure, then it stops. But in case of quaternary structure, two polypeptide will be folded, tertiary structure formation will take place, and then they will also interact with each other like this. And there could be multiple of such tertiary structure of polypeptide that will be held together by the same forces, that is the non-covalent forces and the covalent forces. Okay, and this is happening in case of multimeric protein. Multimeric protein. And multimeric proteins are also held together by non-covalent, non-co and covalent bond. And one example of this would be hemoglobin. Because hemoglobin has 4 subunits, and those 4 subunits are 2 alpha and 2 beta subunits, and those alpha beta subunits are held together like this. Beta, alpha. They are held together like this. Okay, so this is all about the folding in proteins and how they attain their structure. And another thing that I had to mention here that I forgot is that structure is very, very important for their function, because depending on their function, depending on their structure, they will be able to perform certain function. For example, if two proteins have different primary structure, say they are made up of AA1, AA2 and so on, AAN, and then there is, this is protein 1, and then there is AA1 prime, AA1 2 prime, and then there is AAN. This is protein 2. If they are folded in the same manner, say for example, they are both forming a structure like this, although their primary structure is different, if they are folding like this, they are tertiary or quaternary structure. Similar, then they will perform the same function. Means they perform same function. So, structure is equivalent to function. One example would be myoglobin and hemoglobin. Their primary structures are different. They are made up of different amino acid chains, okay? But their ultimate, myoglobin is tertiary structure or 3D structure, and hemoglobin is quaternary structure, which is also hemoglobin's 3D structure. They are same, and because of that, they perform the same function, that is binding and carrying oxygen. Binding and carrying oxygen. So, structure is very, very important to perform their function. Just like if two enzymes had different primary structure, but they are both forming a structure like this, then a substrate like this can come and bind to this pocket here, as well as in a different protein. This is P1, this is P2 in a different protein. Although they have different amino acid that make them up, they are forming the same shape where the substrate can come and bind, and that is very, very important to perform their function. So we need to remember this point as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you have any more question, you can ask.